Saul of Tarsus, who is now known as the Apostle or Saint Paul, probably wrote much of this letter we preserve today in our Bibles as 2 Corinthians in the fall of the 55th year of the Common Era. While 2 Corinthians is primarily about God's glory in the midst of suffering, the section of the letter we'll read today is an affirmation of Paul's apostolic authority. You see, part of the motivation for this letter was that some so-called super apostles, had been trying to confuse the people of Corinth by presenting them with teachings that differed from those of Paul. He felt that Corinth was his domain, assigned to him by God. In today's reading, Paul begins by boasting about his own revelations and the glory of God, which shines through his own weakness, which I believe he only half-heartedly emphasizes. While Paul doesn't detail the meaning of the thorn given to him in the flesh explicitly here, many interpretations of this thorn have been suggested, including that Paul lived with epilepsy, which might have caused seizures, including the event experienced on the road to Damascus. Epilepsy, which might have also provided him with visions. While I'm not sure that this was the case, it's interesting to learn from Paul how what is often seen as a weakness can also be understood as providing strength. So here I read from 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 1 through 10. It is necessary to boast. Nothing is to be gained by it, but I will go on to the visions and revelations of the Lord. I know a person in Christ who 14 years ago was caught up into the third heaven. Whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know. God knows. And I know that such a person, whether in the body or out of the body, I do not know, but God knows, was caught up into paradise and heard things that are not to be told, that no mortal is permitted to repeat. On behalf of such a one I will boast, but not on my own behalf will I boast, except in my weakness. But if I wish to boast, I would not be a fool, for I will be speaking the truth. But if I refrain from it, so that no one may think better of me than what is seen in me or heard from me, even considering the exceptional character of the revelations. Therefore, to keep me from being too elated, a thorn was given to me in the flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me, to keep me from being too elated. 3 times I appealed to the Lord about this, that it would leave me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. So I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may dwell in me. Therefore, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities for the sake of Christ. For whenever I am weak, then I am strong. Now, I am very pleased to present to you my friend Lucy Rucius, who I know from acting in the Family Theater Company. We have invited her to elucidate for you today her understanding of the many meanings of grace.
Good morning. I'm Lucy. And there are lots of definitions of grace. There's Grace Kelly and Frankian grace. There's the grace period we get when we pay our credit card balance. We say grace at dinner. Grace means effortless beauty or charm of movement or form. You can be dissed, as in disgrace. In Christianity, it means divine favor bestowed freely on people, as in granting redemption from sin. And it means the state of having received such favor and an excellence or power granted by God. Next, oxymorons. Jumbo shrimp. Make haste slowly. Bipartisan cooperation. Business ethics. These are examples of oxymorons. Here's another one, Lucy's grace. I walk like the Frankenstein monster, for goodness sake. I live with young onset Parkinson's disease, and I've lived with it for 32 years. Parkinson's is a neurological condition that affects your movement, speech, and can eventually affect your mental well-being. Parkinson's means your movement is slow, deliberate, and not within your control. It means your balance is off, and it means a lot of scary falls. It means if you have to tie your shoes, you may, after 10 to 15 minutes of trying to tie those shoes, give up and say, I really must look into Velcro. Do I have grace in my life? I enter a room and the first thing that is obvious about me is my walk. I am a woman with Parkinson's, and that's how people will see me. That's just the way it is. People describe me like, Lucy, you know, she's got Parkinson's, she's about 25, 35, 47, 58, 9 years old, about 5'8", and an unnatural redhead. We are tribal animals, and we notice the difference from the rest of us. My medications are freaky. They are so weird. They give me manic episodes when I least expect it. But I get through them because I have to get through them. When I was finally definitively diagnosed with Parkinson's, which took 6 years, I saw a neurologist who was young and male. I said, Doctor, who is going to love me? His answer was, Lucy, we all have the instincts to survive and to procreate. Follow your instincts and you'll be fine. Fine, thanks, Doc. I was particularly challenged when I had brain surgery, where I was awake for a good amount of the operation. Yes, I said awake. There's no feeling in the brain, so they can poke around and everything. They needed me to be talking to the surgeons so they could decide based upon my input if they had the electrodes they were implanting in my brain in the optimal positions. At least they put you out when they drill through your skull. It was the hardest day of my life, and I wouldn't do it again, except the benefit was so wonderful. There I was, with my head shaved, with a halo pierced into my temples, and my head bolted to the operating table, and I'm doing all sorts of finger tricks for the surgeons while they performed deep brain stimulation on me to help with my worsening Parkinson's. It was elective surgery, for crying out loud. I actually chose to have this procedure, but I was at the point where I didn't have a choice but to have the electrodes implanted in my little brain. 10 hours later, they were done. But during those 10 hours were complications I didn't see coming. Because I'm left-handed, they did the right side of my brain first, in case they ran out of time to get to the left side of my brain. I'd at least have my dominant side done. When they got to the left side of my brain, hold the phone. There were tiny holes that they had never seen before on any brain that had developed on my left brain, and they more than complicated placing the electrode. Not wanting to worry me, they didn't tell me. I was awakened and found everyone in the OR was standing around wringing their hands and staring at a monitor. They all had half masks on their faces, but I could see the worry in their eyes. Then, out of my peripheral vision, I see the two surgeons with a huge book they're reading and thumbing through and pointing at pictures. And I asked, "What's going on?" Debbie, the nurse, said, "Nothing." I said, "Oh yeah, I can see you guys, and your eyes say something different." "Nothing is wrong, Lucy." I said, "I don't believe you." And what are my surgeons doing? Reading up on the latest in surgical procedure in their giant coffee table book. The doctors took their book and moved out of my line of vision. I once again said, "What's wrong?" They answered once again, "Nothing. Nothing's wrong." Well, I began to cry, and I was promptly knocked out. How convenient for them. When I woke up, they were still in their worried positions. And I started to panic, and I blurted out, "I want my dad." Then I heard his voice, the voice of my father from the grave, saying, "Lucy, you toughen up. Do you hear me?" I said, "Toughen up." That is so my dad. That is so Jim Ruchis. I prayed quietly to myself to muster the strength to get through this operation with my brain still intact. You see, I had been off my meds, all of them, for hours and hours, and I could hardly stand it. I toughened up, and I got through it. I got through it with the help of my dad's voice and some divine intervention. There was such demand from him. He would accept nothing less of me but my very best. And I needed to put my energy in getting through this with grace. Yes, with grace. I had wound myself up like a clock, and I needed to hear that I was okay. It was such a long day. At one point, I was bored, and I asked the surgeon if he was married. With my head bolted to a table. Well, a single gal needs to know these things. And he wasn't married. Later, after the operation was over, they confessed they had not been willing to tell me the truth. I was like, holes in my brain? Well, I'm not concerned. But tell me, are the holes like Swiss cheese and the electrode can fall through them? Dr. Razai, that's his name, my surgeon, laughed and said, no, they're minuscule. Right, I knew that. Do I live my life full of grace? I know this much. I want grace in my life, all kinds of grace, the dinner table grace and the empowering grace and the Grace Kellys of the world. Did I live my life with grace during my brain surgery? I know I got through it, and if getting through rough patches takes grace, so be it. There's one thing I live in my life every day. It's laughter. If I can't poke fun at my circumstances, I'm not fully human. When I die, I hope to have a good scorecard with some gold stars on it. And before we die, we're going to live our lives to the fullest and have fun and have meaning to our lives. And I'm not going to have brain surgery ever again. I am not. Parkinson's or not, I'm responsible for my life now and how I live it and how I love it. How graceful of me. This feels good. Goodness gracious. And that's what I have to say to you today. Thank you.